Nature Inc. this week. It's a 100-million-year-old codependency. Flowering plants need bees and vice versa. But protecting that relationship is not just about nature, it's about cold, hard cash. A $20 billion agri-industry depends on bees, but they're vanishing mysteriously. So what are the bees' needs? Also coming up, a recent European Union ruling allows the seeds from shea trees to be used to make chocolate. It could be boom time in the savannah, but not without these boomtown bats. Welcome to Nature Inc., a new series that puts a price tag on the services nature delivers. Around 200 years ago, the so-called free market took over global economic thinking. But in the rush to industrialise, nature was left off the books.
We depend on nature. Our lives are all combined in different ways with nature. We need nature to do things for us, but we don't pay nature anything.
Now, some economists are beginning to accept what some scientists have been arguing for quite a while. Namely, the services nature provides need to be counted in assessments of nations' GNP.
Nature is extremely valuable when you think of value as contribution to human well-being. It's priceless in the sense that it's not part of the market transaction.
5 years ago, Dr. Robert Costanza and his team at the University of Vermont tried to analyse the economic benefits of nature. They came up with an astounding figure, $33 trillion US, a total bigger than the entire world economy at the time.
We had looked at different ecosystem services around the world. So we had more than 200 studies that we synthesized those results from.
$33 trillion? It sounds unbelievable, but it's an idea governments are now taking seriously.
I think Costanza got the economics wrong, but what he did point out to everybody that ecosystems do have great value.
The numbers are controversial. The numbers should be controversial. We want a controversy. We want people to start thinking about nature and the economy.
On the farm calendar, it's Monday, February 25th, 2008.
Late winter in Northern California. The perfect time and place to start looking at the services we are getting for free. Dan Cummings is preparing his almond crop for pollination. The trees are only in bloom for 3 weeks.
This is an absolutely critical time of the year for my business. If we don't get the weather that provides for the bees to fly and cross-pollinate, then we won't set a very good crop. Honeybees and the pollination service that they provide to almond growers is absolutely essential. There's no way around it. Almonds are not self-fertile. They need a pollinator to transfer the pollen from one variety to another variety. And this has to happen over about a 3 or 4 week period. At the end of winter, actually, these trees are just starting to wake up. Their roots are just starting to grow. The leaves haven't emerged yet. They come into full bloom. It's the first deciduous fruit tree to bloom in California. And we bring these boxes in full of bees, spread them throughout the countryside, and they go to work making a crop for us.
Almond orchards cover 250,000 hectares.
80% of the world's production of almonds is grown in California. If you go back to the year 2000, this industry was producing approximately 700 million pounds a year. Today we're at 1.4 billion pounds. That's a 100% increase in just the last 7 years.
And few make more money than Paramount Farms, the industry's giant.
I've been in the industry 30 years, and I never thought that we'd see a crop that size. And moreover, not only did I not think we'd ever see a crop that size, but I never imagined that we'd be able to market a crop that size. We're in a new realm for the almond industry in California, and we've kind of hit the big time here as far as a crop is concerned.
We are the #1 horticultural export from the United States, and the #1 ag export to the European Union today.
But this output of almonds would be impossible without one of nature's many gifts, pollination. Gene Brandy is a very busy Californian beekeeper.
Without bees, without honeybees like these, our diet would be pretty bland. We wouldn't have very many fruits and vegetables at all. certainly would have no almonds. Well, you know, there's over $15 billion worth of crops that are grown in the U.S. that wouldn't be here to the extent that they are without honeybee pollination. The need for bees for pollinators has never been greater.
Scott Hunter is a second-generation almond farmer who has ridden the wave of success of the industry, but for how much longer, he wonders.
When I first started farming up here in '92, bees were not really that big of a deal. I mean, you ordered your bees, you called your beekeeper, and all of a sudden the bees were there when you needed them. But what happened was that all these big plantings started taking place on the west side, on the west of I-5, and what used to be a big planting of 60, 80 acres, now a big planting was 500, 600 acres. So beekeepers really saw that they could increase the volume of their bees, increase the prices of their colonies, because there's now a shortage. Well, these shortages raised the prices from $18 to $30 to what I pay today, which is $145 a hive.
Hunter Farms has 240 hectares of almond orchards. Paramount Farms has 8,000. Both are totally dependent on the honeybee.
It's simply supply and demand. It's possible to raise bees for almond pollination, and there will simply be a price that makes sure that that happens. The almond growers will pay what it takes to get pollination services.
The problem is that in 2006, the bees started dying in California and in other parts of the USA. 1 million commercial hives, that's over half of the total in the US, were deserted by their occupants. Sue Kobe is a scientist at the Bee Research Center in UC Davis investigating colony collapse.
It's very complex. I kind of put it under the headline of stress because it's many things. It's nutrition, it's pesticides, the environment. We have some new pests and diseases. The symptoms we're finding are very different, and they vary between beekeepers. So it's really hard to put your finger on one specific issue. This is a very sick hive. Just kind of shows you what happens. And it happens very, very fast. For some beekeepers, sometimes some it's a slow dwindle. Some will have nice healthy colonies. They'll come back and there'll be nothing left in the colonies. Just the adults. It's kind of a cleansing thing. When they're sick, they go out and they don't come back. If you look over time, we've had crashes of bee populations, then they build up again. But this one seems so much more devastating. I think it's kind of a wake-up call to the environment. But you put the pests and diseases, pesticides on top of that, poor nutrition, and it's just too much for the bees to handle.
One of the scientists brought in by the almond growers to investigate colony collapse was Gordon Wardell of the USDA Agricultural Research Service.
What we're trying to do is we're trying to figure out what's going on with colony collapse, with why bees are dying today. We're looking for crops that produce greater poundage, per acre, and that's great. But we also need to look at what do the bees need.
Wardell claims to have created a successful bee food supplement to try to help recover populations.
We asked the bees, what do you like? And we started putting out dishes of different proteins and things and gave the bees a choice. And they very quickly told us what they liked. Balanced those with, to look at amino acid levels, vitamins, minerals, put it together, and after probably close to 3,000 trials, we have a diet that seems to really do well for the bees.
They're doing pretty good. They've had a couple of really bad days.
If we keep pushing the envelope and keep losing the bees and the crop keeps growing, are we going to be able to sustain the pollination? It's so outside of what is natural, for the bees. There's nothing in that field except the crop that's supposed to be there. All the weeds are taken out. And that's great for the crop. That's wonderful. And it works great with no-till agriculture as well. But the problem is the diversity is gone. And bees, like people, need diversity.
But for almond farmers, the market continues to dictate their business.
I love the idea, this idea that's kind of encapsulated by this term sustainable agriculture, and we certainly try and do as much of it as we can, but the fact of the matter is that the world has grown to a point now where we need intensive agriculture simply to feed everyone in the world.
The Almond Board is pouring millions of dollars into scientific research and working with beekeepers to try to find out what's killing the bees. But Scott Hunter, like many smaller farmers, has found his own answers to increased demand and collapsing bees. One of his solutions was to hire bees flown in from abroad.
I noticed you got some Australian bees coming in.
Yeah, this ranch here, we're going to do Australians this year. We tried it out just because the price of these bees are getting crazy.
Boy, are they ever getting crazy.
Bees now make up 20% of Scott Hunter's production costs. Before the colonies collapsed, it was 5%.
The big issue here is at what point does pollination and the input costs that affect agriculture start to affect the viability of my family farm? And as I look at the future, I look at handing off this ranch to my son and to the future generations, I have to wonder how much more viable can we be? And I'm a little concerned about that. I'm actually really concerned.
It was obvious in 1860, 1870 that eventually it would make sense to stop trying to accumulate more and more and more. There's limits to what we can get out of nature. There's limits to why we'd want to consume more. John Stuart Mill actually has beautiful passages about surely someday we'll stop elbowing and pushing and stomping on each other's feet and get out of the market mentality, the competitive world.
Where we're pushing the bees to the limit. We're asking, way too much of the bees already, and that's why we're having problems. It's like death by 1,000 cuts, where we keep, doing things that shorten their life and shorten their life and shorten their life, and we've pushed bees now to that point where they can't do it anymore. They can't take anymore.
No, literally every country in the world has changed its natural ecosystems. Europe, North America, we lost most of our forests a couple of hundred, several hundred years ago, and we converted them to very rich, powerful agricultural systems. Many developing countries are using that same economic growth model, and yet at the same time not fully realizing the true value of what they're losing.